News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Dan Schwartzman. Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco President Mary Daly said policymakers must be open to signs that artificial intelligence will have an impact on the U.S. economy. Daly was speaking at an event hosted by the Silicon Valley Leadership Group in San Jose, California.
When does it move from, something that's just in the development stages, and with electricity, the wealthy urban areas had it and the rural areas didn't? In this, could this go faster? Is the diffusion of AI and its use cases faster?
That's San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly. Fed officials are trying to assess how much of an impact AI will have on the economy and on productivity growth. President Trump's nominee to be the next Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, has argued that AI is transforming the economy and that the central bank needs to acknowledge it. The U.S. and Iran making progress in nuclear talks in Geneva, with Iran saying it has reached a, quote, general agreement with the U.S. on the basis of a potential deal that would lift sanctions on Tehran. Iran is expected to present the U.S. with a new detailed proposal in 2 weeks to address some gaps in negotiations. The diplomatic progress came despite growing military deployments in the Persian Gulf, with Iran today closing the Strait of Hormuz for several hours to conduct military drills. Oil fell on the news of the positive negotiations to under $62.50 a barrel. The Reverend Jesse Jackson, one of the most prominent civil rights activists, as well as a two-time presidential candidate and the founder of the Rainbow Push Coalition, has died at the age of 84. Fellow civil rights activist Al Sharpton talked about his friend.
Now, he was a hard taskmaster. He would always get on me about, why are you on this issue? You need to be more studied on this. But he was one who was more responsible than anyone for teaching me activism.
That's civil rights activist Al Sharpton. Jackson had disclosed back in 2017 that he had Parkinson's disease. A third round of U.S.-led negotiations on ending Russia's war on Ukraine began in Geneva. There is little optimism that a breakthrough can be reached to stop the more than 4 years of fighting. The talks are expected to address a wide range of issues, including territory, military, political, and economic matters, and will continue for a second day on Wednesday. Bloomberg's Oliver Crook with more.
I think that the sort of expectations are fairly low from, the sort of renewed effort with the trilateral talks that involve the United States, the Ukrainians, and the Russians, where basically this is the third meeting in about 3 weeks. So there certainly has been an increase of the cadence of these sort of negotiations. That being said, again, you listen to Marco Rubio while he's been in Munich, while he's been in Budapest over the last couple of days. He's basically saying some days I feel better about it than others, but at the end of the day, I'm not really in a position to say whether or not we're any closer to a resolution for this war.
That's Bloomberg's Oliver Crook. Warner Brothers Discovery will reopen negotiations with Paramount Skydance after Paramount proposed raising its bid and sweetening other terms of its offer. Netflix, which is considered Warner Brothers' preferred bidder, has granted the board 7 days to consider Paramount's proposal, which includes raising its offer to at least $31 a share, $1 higher than its previous offer. Warner Brothers said the board still unanimously recommends shareholders vote in favor of its binding agreement to sell its namesake studios and HBO Max streaming business to Netflix for $27.75 a share, or $72 billion in total. Apple is speeding up development of 3 new wearable devices as part of its shift toward artificial intelligence-powered hardware, a category also being pursued by OpenAI and Meta platforms. The company is ramping up work on smart glasses as well as a pendant that can be pinned to a shirt or worn as a necklace, and AirPods with expanded AI capabilities. That's according to people with knowledge of the plans. All 3 devices are being built around the Siri digital assistant, which will rely on visual context to carry out actions. Ford Motor is gearing up for next year's debut of a budget-priced electric vehicle line to contend with China, with a starting price of $30,000, about $20,000 cheaper than the average new car in the U.S. Ford has engineered its new generation EV to be lighter, sleeker, and more electrically efficient, with a driving range extended by around 50 miles. Ford is making the move despite taking $19.5 billion in charges tied to a sweeping overhaul of its EV business after struggling for years to make it profitable. A federal judge ruling that Immigration and Customs Enforcement cannot re-detain Kilmar Abrego Garcia because a 90-day detention period has already expired, as well as the government not having a viable plan for deporting him. Abrego Garcia was mistakenly deported back to El Salvador last year, becoming a focal point on immigration issues. The government has been attempting to deport him to an African country. New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani threatening to raise the city's property taxes by as much as 9.5% 2.5%, while also raiding the city's reserve fund in an effort to fill a $5 billion budget gap. The hike would affect more than 3 million residential and more than 100,000 commercial units. We checked the markets all day long here at Bloomberg. The Dow finished up 0.1%, as did both the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. The yield on the 10-year is currently at 4.049, while the 2-year is at 3.43. Gold futures have dropped below $4,900 an ounce amid weaker Asian demand, while Bitcoin is trading at under $68,000. Norway continues to dominate the medal count at the Milan Cortina Olympics with 30 total. The U.S. sits in third with 20, also behind Italy. Norway also leading the way with 13 gold medals. The U.S. has won 6. Tonight at the Olympics is the highly anticipated women's figure skating short program. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Dan Schwartzman, and this is Bloomberg.